Leadville, Colorado, October 1879. At 10,000 feet above sea level, Chen Wei-ming hauls wagon loads of clay bricks to his modest cabin, while neighbors stock firewood for the brutal winter ahead. His fellow miners watch in bewilderment as he dismantles his perfectly good wooden bed frame and begins building what they call a brick tomb, a massive sleeping platform made of 180 clay bricks with internal heating channels. They call him foolish. The local newspaper mocks his strange construction. Store owners refuse credit for such unnecessary masonry. Everyone knows proper winter survival means potbelly stoves and thick blankets, not sleeping on stones. Then December arrives with record-breaking cold, 47 degrees below zero. Standard cabins freeze despite burning stoves all night. Indoor temperatures drop to 18 degrees. But Wei Ming's brick bed? It stays 72 degrees warm, heated by stored thermal energy. What did this Chinese miner understand about heat and survival that an entire mining camp missed? If you value stories of practical wisdom that stood the test of time, make sure to subscribe. We've got more documented accounts worth remembering. The morning air at 10,152 feet carried the bite of approaching winter as Chen Wei-ming guided his rented wagon down Harrison Avenue, past the bustling storefronts and saloons that made Leadville the second-largest city in Colorado Territory. While his neighbors hurried between lumber yards and coal suppliers, calculating cords of firewood and tons of heating fuel needed to survive another brutal mountain winter, Wei Ming's wagon creaked under a different burden entirely. 180 clay bricks, carefully wrapped in canvas to prevent chipping, occupied most of the wagon bed alongside 12 flat sandstone slabs that had cost him nearly a month's mining wages. Patrick O'Malley paused in his own preparations, setting down an armload of seasoned pine logs to watch the unusual procession. The Irish miner had spent 3 winters in these mountains, learning the hard arithmetic of frontier survival. A standard cabin required 4 to 6 cords of firewood to maintain minimal warmth through the coldest months, with cast iron potbelly stoves providing heat in an 8 to 10 foot radius at best. Beyond that circle, temperatures dropped rapidly, leaving corners of even well-built cabins frozen solid despite continuous burning. O'Malley had arranged his own winter quarters according to established wisdom. Thick wool blankets layered with buffalo robes, a wooden bed frame raised 18 inches off the cold floor, and a reliable system for banking fires overnight with slow-burning logs that would smolder until dawn. "Chen's building himself a brick tomb," O'Malley muttered to the other miners gathering to watch the spectacle. The comment sparked laughter and head-shaking among men who understood winter's demands in practical, measurable terms. They knew that survival meant maintaining indoor temperatures 20 to 25 degrees warmer than the outside air, burning wood continuously through the night, and accepting that anything more than 10 feet from an active stove would freeze, regardless of insulation or construction quality. The mockery followed Wei Ming as he unloaded his materials outside his modest log cabin. The Leadville Herald's correspondent, Mary Catherine O'Brien, had already begun crafting what would become a widely read article headlined, "Celestial's Strange Construction Confounds Neighbors." At Hartman's General Store, owner Klaus Hartman refused to extend credit for what he deemed unnecessary masonry supplies, questioning why any reasonable person would spend hard-earned silver on building materials when proper blankets and heating equipment remained available. Even among the small community of Chinese miners who had followed the railroad construction crews into Colorado's mining districts, Wei Ming faced private skepticism about his judgment and use of precious resources. Wei Ming's persistence drew from memories that stretched back to childhood winters in Harbin, Manchuria, where temperatures regularly dropped to 22 degrees below zero for months at a time. In that climate, survival depended not on burning fuel continuously, but on understanding how dense materials could absorb, store, and release heat over extended periods. The Kang system had warmed Chinese homes for over 2,000 years, using thermal mass principles that frontier Americans had never encountered in their wood-burning traditions. When Wei Ming attempted to explain these concepts to his dismissive neighbors, his broken English failed to convey the sophisticated thermal dynamics at work. He spoke of bricks that could hold heat like rivers hold water, of sleeping surfaces that remained warm hours after fires died, of using a stove's exhaust to heat an entire bed rather than just heating the air around it. To listeners accustomed to American heating methods, these explanations sounded like foreign superstition rather than tested engineering. Inside his cabin, Wei Ming spread detailed sketches across his small wooden table, measuring and calculating dimensions that would fit within his existing space while maximizing thermal efficiency. His plan called for a raised brick platform measuring 7 feet long by 4 feet wide, built 24 inches off the cabin floor to allow air circulation underneath while positioning the sleeping surface at optimal height for heat transfer to the human body. The foundation would require 16 pieces of 2 by 8 inch pine lumber, arranged in a framework with cross bracing every 18 inches to support the massive weight of the thermal mass system. The internal structure would prove far more complex than his neighbors imagined. Wei Ming planned to arrange the 180 clay bricks in a hollow, rectangular formation, creating internal channels that would snake through the platform's interior. A 6-inch diameter exhaust channel would connect to his cabin's wood stove, routing the hot gases through 28 feet of internal pathway before venting outside. This design would capture heat that normally escaped up the chimney, storing it in dense clay that could release warmth steadily over 8 to 12 hours. The surface would consist of flat sandstone slabs, creating a smooth sleeping platform, separated from the internal flue system by 4 inches of sand insulation weighing 1,200 pounds total. This barrier would prevent direct contact with exhaust gases while allowing controlled heat transfer to create an even, warm sleeping surface. Wei Ming calculated that the system's thermal mass, over half a ton of heat-storing brick and stone, could maintain sleeping temperatures of 70 to 80 degrees throughout the night from just 4 hours of active burning. Building Inspector Thomas Hartwell threatened code violations, pointing out that no precedent existed in American construction standards for brick sleeping platforms with integrated heating systems. The local doctor, Samuel Morrison, warned of mysterious oriental fever that might result from sleeping on heated stones, reflecting medical opinions that viewed radiant heating as potentially dangerous to proper circulation and respiratory health. Johann Müller, the German blacksmith whose shop provided metalwork for most mining operations, questioned Wei Ming's structural calculations and the safety of routing stove exhaust through wooden-framed masonry construction. Despite mounting opposition from authorities, neighbors, and even fellow Chinese miners, Wei Ming continued his methodical preparation. Each evening, after completing his shift in the silver mines, he worked by lamplight positioning bricks, measuring joints, and testing the alignment of his heating channels. His careful approach contrasted sharply with frontier building practices that emphasize speed and expedience over thermal efficiency or long-term performance. Construction began before dawn on October 20th, when Wei Ming lit his kerosene lamp and began laying out the foundation framework inside his cabin. Working by the flickering light, he positioned the first of 16 2 by 8 inch pine timbers, measuring each placement with the methodical precision that had made him a valuable crew foreman during railroad construction in the Sierra Nevada. The foundation demanded absolute accuracy, cross-bracing every 18 inches to distribute the enormous weight of thermal mass that would soon rest upon it. Each joint required careful attention, as the completed platform would hold over half a ton of brick, stone, and sand insulation. The physical demands of moving materials alone challenged Wei Ming's endurance. Individual clay bricks weighed nearly 6 pounds each, requiring him to transport them from his outdoor storage pile to the cabin's interior 20 or 30 at a time. The timber framework, once properly braced and leveled, needed to support not just the static weight of 180 bricks, but the thermal expansion and contraction that would occur as the system heated and cooled through daily cycles. Wei Ming's railroad experience had taught him that thermal stress could destroy improperly designed structures, making precise measurement and robust construction essential for long-term reliability. As the foundation took shape, Wei Ming began the intricate process of arranging bricks in their hollow rectangular formation. This phase required understanding three-dimensional geometry that his neighbors found incomprehensible. Each brick needed precise positioning to create internal channels while maintaining structural integrity throughout the platform. The 6-inch diameter exhaust pathway would snake through the brick interior in a serpentine pattern, maximizing surface area contact between hot gases and thermal mass while ensuring proper draft and ventilation. Patrick O'Malley and other observers watched in bewilderment as Wei Min worked with surveyors' tools borrowed from the mining company, measuring angles and spacing with mathematical precision that seemed absurdly excessive for sleeping arrangements. "He's building that contraption like it's the foundation for the Denver Mint," O'Malley remarked to fellow miners who gathered each evening to observe the strange construction project. Their own winter preparations involved straightforward tasks: splitting firewood, banking earth around cabin foundations, and arranging furniture to maximize heat retention from simple wood stoves. The technical explanations Wei Min offered only deepened the community's skepticism. Standing amid his partially completed brickwork, he attempted to describe thermal mass principles using concepts that had no equivalent in American frontier experience. Dense materials, he explained through gestures and broken English, could absorb heat during active burning periods, when stove exhaust reached 300 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Clay bricks, unlike wood or air, would store this thermal energy and release it slowly over 8 to 12 hours, providing steady warmth long after fires died down to coals. Dr. Samuel Morrison, whose Harvard medical training represented the pinnacle of Eastern establishment knowledge, publicly questioned the health implications of Wei Min's heating system. The physician warned that sleeping directly on heated surfaces might disrupt natural circulation, cause respiratory problems, or expose the sleeper to dangerous exhaust gases that could accumulate in the internal channels. Morrison's concerns reflected conventional medical wisdom that favored fresh air circulation and elevated sleeping surfaces over what he termed Oriental heating practices with unknown physiological effects. Building. Inspector Thomas Hartwell escalated his opposition by threatening formal code violations and construction permits that could shut down the project entirely. American building standards provided no framework for evaluating brick sleeping platforms with integrated heating systems, leaving Hartwell to rely on safety concerns about structural integrity and fire hazards. The inspector questioned whether wooden framework could safely support the thermal cycling of heated masonry, whether internal flue systems might create carbon monoxide risks, and whether the unconventional construction violated territorial fire safety regulations. Wei Min's lumber supplier, influenced by community skepticism, began questioning the structural calculations and demanding additional payments for materials he deemed likely to fail. The supplier pointed out that standard cabin construction relied on proven techniques developed through decades of frontier experience, while Wei Min's design represented untested foreign methods that could collapse under thermal stress or prove impossible to repair if components failed during winter isolation. Economic pressure mounted as Wei Min's mining foreman expressed concerns about job security and work performance. The elaborate construction project required significant time and energy that could interfere with Wei Min's mining duties, especially as he worked alone on the brick platform before dawn and after completing underground shifts. The foreman privately questioned whether an employee so focused on unusual personal projects could maintain the reliability and attention to safety that hard rock mining demanded during dangerous winter conditions. Despite mounting opposition from authorities, suppliers, and employers, Wei Min continued the methodical construction process. Each evening, he positioned bricks according to his detailed sketches, ensuring that internal channels maintained proper dimensions while supporting the platform's overall structural integrity. The work demanded physical strength, mathematical precision, and unwavering confidence in thermal principles that no one else in Leadville understood or accepted. The internal flue system proved especially challenging, requiring Wei Min to visualize three-dimensional pathways that would route exhaust gases through 28 feet of brick channels without creating restrictions or dead zones that might impair draft. He tested each section as construction progressed, using candles and smoke to verify airflow patterns and identify potential problems before permanently sealing channels with additional brickwork. Critics confidently predicted multiple failure modes for Wei Min's elaborate system. The bricks would crack from thermal expansion, they warned, creating dangerous gaps that could leak deadly exhaust gases into the sleeping area. The wooden foundation would weaken under repeated heating and cooling cycles, potentially causing catastrophic collapse during the night. The internal channels would clog with soot and debris, rendering the heating system useless within weeks of operation. Most fundamentally, they argued, the thermal mass would prove inadequate for mountain winters, leaving Wei Min colder than conventional heating methods, while having wasted months of labor and expensive materials on a doomed experiment. After 23 days of evening and weekend construction, Wei Min positioned the final sandstone slab atop 4 inches of sand insulation, completing the smooth sleeping surface that would soon test every assumption about frontier heating methods against the approaching reality of another brutal Colorado winter. December 15th brought the first serious test of Leadville's winter preparations when the thermometer outside Hartman's General Store registered 18 degrees below zero, 16 degrees colder than the normal December low of 2 degrees above. By dawn, the unprecedented cold had frozen water buckets solid despite their placement within 6 feet of actively burning potbelly stoves, and several miners reported that their cabin interiors had dropped to temperatures barely above 20 degrees, even with continuous wood burning throughout the night. Patrick O'Malley discovered the severity of the situation when his carefully banked fire died sometime before dawn, leaving his cabin so cold that ice had formed on the interior walls 3 feet from his wood stove. Relighting the frozen stove required nearly an hour of work with kindling and coal oil, during which his breath formed visible clouds in the frigid air. Even after achieving a roaring fire, the cabin's temperature climbed slowly, reaching only 25 degrees at a distance of 8 feet from the stove, despite burning seasoned pine at a rate that would normally provide adequate warmth. The extreme cold exposed fundamental limitations in frontier heating methods that most miners had never encountered during typical Colorado winters. Cast iron potbelly stoves, designed for heating small spaces efficiently, required feeding every 2 to 3 hours to maintain even minimal warmth during sustained sub-zero temperatures. Men accustomed to banking fires overnight with slow-burning logs found that their fuel consumption had doubled, then tripled, as they struggled to maintain indoor temperatures sufficient for survival. By December 20th, when the official weather station recorded 31 degrees below zero, Leadville's business district reflected a community in crisis. Hartman's General Store had sold out of extra blankets, buffalo robes, and emergency heating supplies, with desperate customers offering premium prices for wool goods that had been plentiful just weeks earlier. Klaus Hartman watched his inventory disappear as miners purchased every available item that might provide additional insulation or heat retention, from heavy coats to cooking pots that could serve as makeshift braziers. Dr. Samuel. Morrison treated his first cases of frostbite sustained by miners who had suffered exposure while sleeping in their own beds. The victims reported that, despite burning wood continuously through the night, their extremities had grown numb in temperatures that dropped below 15 degrees in corners of cabins located more than 10 feet from active stoves. Morrison's medical training provided little guidance for treating cold injuries sustained indoors, and he began documenting what appeared to be a new category of winter-related health problems. The mining camp's infrastructure buckled under the sustained assault of record-breaking cold. Water pipes froze despite insulation and proximity to heated buildings, forcing residents to melt snow for basic needs while conserving precious fuel for warmth rather than water heating. The local livery stable reported that horses required constant attention and additional feed to maintain body temperature, while several mules suffered frostbite on their ears and hooves despite shelter and blankets. December 23rd brought the thermometer to 43 degrees below zero, a temperature so extreme that the mercury barely registered on instruments designed for typical mountain weather. This historic low, unprecedented in Leadville's recorded weather observations, created conditions that completely overwhelmed conventional heating methods. Standard cabin construction, adequate for normal winter temperatures, proved incapable of retaining warmth generated by wood-burning stoves operating at maximum capacity. Throughout these increasingly desperate conditions, Wei Min maintained a heating routine that appeared almost leisurely compared to his neighbors' frantic struggles. Each evening at 6 o'clock, he lit his wood stove and fed it steadily with split pine until 10 o'clock, allowing the exhaust gases to heat the thermal mass of his brick platform through the internal flue system. At bedtime, he banked the coals and partially closed the exhaust damper, then removed his boots and outer clothing to sleep comfortably in long underwear directly on the fur-padded sandstone surface. The contrast became impossible to ignore as neighboring miners noticed details that contradicted everything they understood about winter heating. Wei Ming's chimney stopped producing visible smoke after 10 o'clock each evening, while other cabins maintained active fires throughout the night to prevent freezing. His morning routine included no desperate rush to relight a frozen stove, no period of waiting for adequate heat before dressing, and no evidence of the sleep deprivation that marked other miners' faces as they struggled through weeks of interrupted rest. Mary Catherine O'Brien, the schoolteacher and newspaper correspondent, began documenting these anomalies with the systematic observation that characterized her educational background. She noted that Wei Ming's firewood pile diminished at a noticeably slower rate than those of his neighbors, despite the extreme cold that had forced other miners to burn through their entire winter supplies by New Year's Day. His daily consumption appeared to be roughly 60% of the wood required by conventional heating methods, even though his cabin maintained comfortable conditions throughout the coldest nights. The economic impact of the sustained cold wave rippled through Leadville's business community, as firewood prices tripled due to unprecedented demand and dwindling supplies. Teamsters who normally hauled ore from mining claims found lucrative work transporting emergency fuel supplies from distant timber sources, while lumber yards that had planned to last through March found themselves nearly empty by year's end. The crisis forced many miners to choose between heating their homes and maintaining adequate funds for food and other necessities. Johann Müller, the German blacksmith whose metalworking shop served the mining district's equipment needs, found his forge in constant demand as desperate customers sought specialized heating devices, modified stove components, and emergency repairs to heating systems damaged by extreme temperature cycling. Muller's own familiarity with European heating methods led him to observe Wei Ming's system with professional interest, recognizing thermal principles that resembled traditional German tile stoves and heated masonry construction. As the 12th consecutive day of sub-zero temperatures began, with no meteorological relief predicted, the mining camp faced the reality that conventional wisdom about frontier heating had proved inadequate for the extreme conditions that nature could impose. The crisis had created a natural experiment in heating efficiency, with measurable results that would soon force the community to reconsider everything they believed about surviving mountain winters. December 28th brought the thermometer to 47 degrees below zero, a temperature so severe that it rendered standard frontier heating methods completely inadequate for human survival. 2 miners were discovered in their beds suffering from advanced hypothermia, despite having maintained active fires throughout the night, their extremities showing the white, waxy appearance of deep frostbite that Dr. Morrison recognized as life-threatening. The men had burned through their remaining firewood supplies in a desperate attempt to maintain warmth, yet their cabin interiors had dropped below 10 degrees, temperatures that made survival impossible even under multiple layers of wool blankets and buffalo robes. The crisis forced Leadville's municipal authorities to establish an emergency shelter in the mining exchange building, where a large central furnace and shared body heat might provide the concentrated warmth that individual cabins could no longer generate. Mayor William James issued a public notice considering the evacuation of non-essential residents to lower elevations, acknowledging that the town's infrastructure had reached the limits of its capacity to protect human life against unprecedented natural conditions. Patrick O'Malley, facing his own cabin temperature of 18 degrees despite burning wood continuously for 3 days, made a decision that would transform the community's understanding of heating technology. Desperate for relief from the numbing cold that prevented sleep and threatened his health, he approached Wei Ming with a proposition that combined skepticism with urgent necessity. O'Malley requested permission to spend one night on the mysterious brick platform, bringing his own thermometer to document the actual performance of the system that his neighbors had ridiculed for months. The measurement session began at sundown, with methodical documentation that would provide irrefutable evidence of thermal performance differences. O'Malley's thermometer registered 47 degrees below zero in the outside air, confirming the historic severity of conditions that had overwhelmed every conventional heating method in the mining camp. Inside his own cabin, positioned 6 feet from an actively burning potbelly stove that consumed wood at an unsustainable rate, the temperature measured 18 degrees, barely above the threshold for human survival and far below levels that permitted comfortable sleep. Wei Ming's cabin presented dramatically different conditions that defied O'Malley's expectations about heating physics. The air temperature 6 feet from Wei Ming's wood stove, which had been inactive since 10 o'clock the previous evening, measured 45 degrees 27 degrees warmer than O'Malley's cabin despite no active heating for 8 hours. The brick surface itself registered 72 degrees, warm enough that O'Malley could place his bare hand on the sandstone slabs without discomfort. Under the fur coverings where Wei Ming normally slept, the thermometer climbed to 89 degrees, creating a microclimate that seemed impossible given the extreme outdoor conditions. The night spent on Wei Ming's Kang system provided O'Malley with his first adequate rest in weeks, as the thermal mass continued releasing stored heat throughout the hours of darkness. While miners throughout Leadville struggled with sleep, interrupted by the need to feed fires every 2 hours, O'Malley slept soundly for 8 consecutive hours on a sleeping surface that maintained consistent warmth without requiring any fuel consumption after the initial evening heating period. The experience convinced him that Wei Ming had discovered heating principles that represented a fundamental advance over conventional American frontier methods. Dr. Samuel Morrison, initially suspicious of O'Malley's enthusiastic endorsement of the Chinese heating system, conducted his own examination of Wei Ming to investigate potential health effects from sleeping on heated stones. Morrison's medical assessment found no evidence of the respiratory problems, circulation issues, or oriental fever that he had predicted might result from radiant heating contact. Wei Ming's physical condition appeared superior to that of other miners who showed signs of sleep deprivation, cold stress, and respiratory irritation from breathing wood smoke in poorly ventilated cabins during extreme weather. The measurable superiority of thermal mass heating began attracting professional attention from technical authorities, who had previously dismissed Wei Ming's construction project. Mining camp foreman James Crawford requested detailed explanations of the heating system's operation, recognizing that worker health and productivity during winter operations could benefit significantly from more efficient heating methods. Crawford's interest reflected practical concerns about maintaining adequate shelter for mining crews during extended cold snaps that might otherwise force dangerous work stoppages. Wei Ming seized the opportunity to provide technical education about thermal mass principles that his earlier attempts had failed to communicate effectively. The 180 clay bricks, weighing approximately 1,080 pounds, created a thermal battery capable of storing heat from 4 hours of wood burning and releasing it steadily over 12 to 14 hours. Dense clay materials absorbed and retained 3 times more thermal energy than air, while the large surface area of the brick platform distributed heat evenly across the entire sleeping area rather than creating the hot and cold zones typical of point source heating. The Kang system's fuel efficiency provided measurable economic advantages that became increasingly important as firewood prices reached crisis levels. Wei Ming's consumption of 2 1/2 cords of wood compared favorably with neighbors who had exhausted 6 or more cords, attempting to maintain minimal warmth during the extended cold wave. His 60% reduction in fuel requirements represented substantial cost savings, while providing superior comfort and safety compared to conventional heating methods. Johann Miller, the German blacksmith whose technical background enabled him to understand Wei Ming's construction methods, began fabricating specialized flue components that would allow other miners to replicate the thermal mass system. Muller's professional analysis confirmed that the Kang design incorporated sound engineering principles similar to European masonry heaters, but adapted for American log cabin construction using readily available materials and simplified installation techniques. 3 neighboring miners began gathering bricks and sandstone slabs for their own thermal mass construction projects, marking the beginning of widespread adoption that would transform Leadville's approach to winter heating. The Leadville Herald published Mary Catherine O'Brien's detailed article documenting the temperature measurements and fuel efficiency, data that provided scientific validation for Wei Ming's heating innovation. Mining company engineers requested technical drawings and construction specifications that could be applied to worker housing throughout Colorado's high-altitude mining operations. The crisis winter had created natural laboratory conditions that tested heating methods under extreme stress, providing measurable results that eliminated speculation about relative performance. Wei Ming's Kang system had demonstrated superior thermal efficiency, fuel economy, safety margins, and human comfort compared to conventional frontier heating technology, establishing thermal mass principles as proven American frontier survival knowledge rather than foreign curiosity. Spring 1880 brought a construction boom unlike anything Leadville had previously experienced as 23 miners began building brick sleeping platforms before the next winter season arrived. The demand for thermal mass heating systems created immediate economic opportunities throughout the mining district, with the local brick manufacturer increasing production by 300% to meet orders that extended far beyond normal construction needs. Klaus Hartmann, the store owner who had previously refused credit for Wei Ming's unnecessary masonry supplies, now stocked specialized components and offered financing plans for miners seeking to replicate the heating technology that had proved its worth during the crisis winter. The terminology celestial bed became standard language for describing heated brick platforms throughout Colorado's mining camps, reflecting both the system's Chinese origins and its seemingly miraculous performance compared to conventional heating methods. Johann Müller, the German blacksmith whose technical expertise had enabled him to understand Wei Ming's construction principles, developed standardized flue components that simplified installation and improved thermal efficiency for miners lacking Wei Ming's construction experience. Muller's shop began manufacturing pre-formed exhaust channels, adjustable dampers, and specialized connecting hardware that reduced construction time from weeks to days while ensuring proper operation of complex thermal mass systems. The economic impact extended beyond individual heating installations as skilled masonry workers found consistent employment building Kang systems throughout the mining region. Wei Ming himself became a respected heating contractor, training apprentices in thermal mass construction techniques while expanding his services to mining camps throughout Colorado's high-altitude districts. His reputation for reliable, efficient heating systems attracted clients from settlements where conventional methods had proved inadequate for mountain conditions, creating a specialized industry based on traditional Chinese technology adapted to American frontier construction. Winter 1880 to 1881 provided definitive validation of the Kang system's life-saving capabilities when sustained cold temperatures again tested Leadville's heating infrastructure. The results documented by Dr. Samuel Morrison and other medical authorities showed 0 cases of frostbite among miners using thermal mass heating systems compared to 15 cases of cold-related injuries among those relying on conventional potbelly stoves and blanket insulation. Pneumonia rates decreased significantly among Kang users, reflecting the superior indoor air quality and consistent temperatures that reduced respiratory stress during extreme weather conditions. Firewood consumption across the mining camp dropped by 50% among households using thermal mass heating, creating substantial economic savings while reducing pressure on local timber resources. The collective fuel efficiency translated into over 500 cords of firewood saved annually across the mining region, representing both cost reductions for individual families and reduced environmental impact on Colorado's mountain forests. These measurable benefits attracted attention from territorial authorities interested in sustainable resource management for expanding mining operations throughout the Rocky Mountain region. The cultural transformation proved as significant as the technical adoption, as Wei Ming's success changed fundamental attitudes toward Chinese traditional knowledge within the mining community. The Leadville Herald published a series of articles titled Oriental Engineering Wisdom that documented other Chinese innovations in mining, construction, and resource management that had previously been dismissed or ignored. Mining companies began hiring Chinese construction supervisors specifically for heating and ventilation projects, recognizing technical expertise that complemented rather than competed with American engineering knowledge. Cross-cultural knowledge sharing became an accepted practice as miners, engineers, and contractors sought to understand principles behind thermal mass heating that could be applied to other construction challenges. Wei Ming's willingness to teach his methods, combined with the measurable superiority of his results, created a model for incorporating immigrant technical knowledge into American frontier development. The success challenged assumptions about cultural superiority and established precedents for evaluating innovations based on performance rather than ethnic origins. Technical refinements continued as Kang systems spread throughout Colorado's mining districts, with variations developed for family-size platforms, integration with cooking systems, and improved draft control mechanisms. The Mining and Scientific Press Journal published detailed construction plans and performance specifications that enabled replication throughout the Western Territories, while mining equipment manufacturers began producing specialized components designed specifically for thermal mass heating installations. When January 1881 brought another severe cold snap with temperatures reaching 39 degrees below zero, Leadville's mining operations continued without interruption as workers maintained comfortable shelter conditions using proven thermal mass technology. No emergency evacuations were required, no municipal crisis shelters needed activation, and mining productivity remained stable throughout the cold period that would have created dangerous working conditions just 2 years earlier. Wei Ming's personal success enabled him to bring his family from China to Colorado, establishing a household that became a center for technical education and cultural exchange within the mining community. His sons learned both traditional Chinese construction methods and American frontier techniques, creating a generation capable of bridging cultural and technical knowledge systems. The family's prosperity demonstrated that immigrant technical expertise could provide economic advancement while contributing to American frontier development. By 1885, over 200 Kang systems had been constructed throughout Colorado mining camps, with 35 specialized builders employed in thermal mass heating construction. The technology had proven its reliability across diverse elevation, climate, and construction conditions, establishing thermal mass heating as standard rather than experimental technology for high-altitude frontier settlements. Estimated lives saved through improved winter heating reached 12 to 15 people, while collective fuel savings exceeded 1,000 cords annually across the mining region. The fundamental lesson transcended heating technology to demonstrate how traditional knowledge, initially dismissed as primitive by those lacking experience with its applications, often contained solutions perfectly adapted to environmental challenges. Wei Ming's Kang system succeeded through understanding basic physical principles rather than complex engineering, working with natural thermal dynamics instead of fighting against them. His patient persistence in the face of ridicule and institutional opposition had transformed not only individual survival outcomes, but community attitudes toward innovation, cultural knowledge, and the value of learning from diverse technical traditions.